The most highly valued position in the game of hockey is undoubtedly the center, and the 2026 draft class has a distinct lack of quality centers at the top end. So, on today's show, we're breaking down what that means.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USA Scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we are going to be building off of the most recent episode here where we released our midterm top 50 rankings here for the podcast. A lot of interesting takes in there, some distinct tiers and drop-offs that may be a bit different than what other outlets or scouts are saying out there publicly. So definitely do go give that episode a listen. But on today's episode, we're focusing specifically on one single position, right down the middle, the centers. There's only one center in my top 10. There's only 5 centers in my top 20, and there's only 8 in my first round. Then you have a bit more of a concentration of more pivots in my second round, and you can bet a lot that multiple of them, if not most of them, will actually end up being first-round draft selections because of that position and the fact that a lot of these centers are going to go earlier than you may expect in terms of just purely what they bring to the ice in terms of skill and talent, because teams need centers. They need quality centers. And this draft class, it's not its strongest suit, but there's definitely still some really interesting talents down the middle. And we'll be presenting the ones that I ranked in the rankings to you here on today's show and discussing a little bit of where these guys might go, how you might see a lot of ripple effects coming with centers being reached on in this year specifically. We see this every season, but I think 2026 it's going to be really magnified. You're going to see 1 or 2 centers go in the top 10 that on pure skill alone aren't really top 10 talents, especially in a draft class like this one with a lot of parity among high skilled players at the top end of the draft class. So we've got a lot to talk about here on today's show. On New Year's Eve here, we have, of course, a lot of content coming your way here on the last day of the year. We kept some, hopefully some of the best for last for 2025, as we have, again, we're a full-on New Year's Eve celebration here with a whole lot of episodes coming your way. So before we dig into this entire show, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So the 2026 draft, we're seeing a lot of these players in the limelight of the World Junior Championships at the moment, whether it be players like Gavin McKenna, who did retain his spot at first overall on my board, or others like Chase Reed and Albert Schmitz, who have been shining in their top 4 opportunities, respectively, with Latvia and the United States. And I think overall, this tournament, it's really the moment where a lot of these players are really come into public light for the first time on a massive stage, where you and your families may now recognize some or many of these names because you were watching or you began watching the tournament together during the holidays here. And I think it's a wonderful time of year to come out with a midterm ranking, which is why I timed it this way. And on today's show, we're really delving into the centers, and we're going to for those watching on YouTube, bring up a visualization here as well, which is just the top end of my draft rankings, the first 2 tiers between number 1 and number 18th overall. And as you can see, I do have 7 players in my first tier. It is really, really tight. If you want a breakdown of why I think that is the case, go check out yesterday's episode, or actually today. Go check out the last episode. But In terms of centers, there's only one guy for me that's really established himself as a slam dunk top 10 player in this class, and that is Tynan Lawrence, the captain of the Muskegon Lumberjacks. For me, he's the prize down the middle in this year's class, and for that reason, I don't think he's going to be available at 5th overall anymore. I think there's a very good chance he goes top 3 in this class because of not just his position, but his brand of hockey. He brings speed, he brings dynamism, he brings intelligence and responsibility. He's a 3-zone center with a really high motor who doesn't leave you wanting in any phase of play and can really create with his feet, with his hands, with his playmaking ability off the rush. Very versatile player who can make a difference off the cycle, make a difference in transition, stifle opposing rushes on the back check, and also really play quite well in the penalty kill if he's tasked with that type of responsibility as well. He can do genuinely everything. And with that motor, he's just an engine for his team. I think that says a lot about his quality on the ice. And then the next center on my board is at number 11, and it's Viggo Björck, who may end up as a winger in the NHL. We will see, but he's played more center than not so far this season. And he's a player that with high-end intelligence, great vision, strong playmaking upside, he could find his way into certain top 10 boards. Do I think he is going to be a top 10 pick in the NHL draft? No, I don't. I think that his status as a 5'9" center slash winger maybe is going to hurt his stock a bit, especially in a class that has so many big right shot defensemen, overall quality on the blue line, a big power forward like Ethan Belchitz, also probably ahead of him in most rankings. I see him as the prize outside the top 10 in this class. I think he's got great upside. The skill's fantastic. He can drive offense. Yeah, intelligence to connect play, I think, is really special. He's a player that shouldn't go undervalued, but I'd also be surprised if he actually ends up being the second center selected, because I see the next guys as having better chances at really cracking the top 10 on draft day. And that starts off with Caleb Malhotra, the son of Manny. Not yet a face-off monster, but a player with really sound two-way habits. He works hard. He adopts supportive positions on both sides of the puck, back checks with vigor. He's a player that can really help out your team defensively. He's shown that with the Brantford Bulldogs this season. And yeah, he's been scoring at a high rate like every single other forward on the Brantford Bulldogs this year. But he's a player that I think can really, really help his line, be a facilitator, be a line elevator who makes his wingers better. And I think that brand of hockey with some, I guess, borderline second line upside, but probably more likely a third line player at the end of the day, I still think he's going to have a lot of teams salivating over him. At number 14, we've got Yegor Shilov, my 14th ranked player. He's a guy that on skill alone, I like more than Malhotra. He's not as refined yet, but I think he has more runway, he has more upside. He's a player with really high-end vision, great playmaking chops, very creative with the puck on his stick, who's also able to really calm things down defensively, play structured, composed defensive hockey when he needs to. That versatility, I think, really sets him apart and makes him a standout as a top 5 center in this class. But he's not the only one in this type of mold, as we also have Oliver Suvanto from Tappara in the Finnish Liga in the top playing against pro competition this year. And this is the youngest center or the second youngest center that we're looking at here on today's show. September 3rd birthday, less than 2 weeks off from being eligible for next year's draft class. Oliver Savanto's big, 6'3", 207 pounds, not overly special offensively, but he plays heavy, gets to the net front, drives the middle lane, creates space and time for his wingers to create, and defensively is really responsible and mature. This guy plays like he's 23 years old, and he's only turning 18 on September 3rd. Like, this guy is very, very young for the class, and I think a very special player to keep an eye on. And those truly, to me, are the top 5 centers in this year's draft. I still have a pretty big gap between them and number 6. That being said, there's also a pretty big gap between number 6 and number 7. So I don't think there's all that much between this tier and players that are like slam slam dunk first rounders. You have a couple guys that are at the end of that range. But beyond that, I think there's a lot of possibility for second round caliber centers to be selected higher inside the first round. Guys like Brooks Rogowski, for instance, could easily be a top 15 pick with his 6'7", 232-pound frame. The skill, I have some question marks about, and I see him as a comfortable fourth line projection with a top 9 upside. I still think there's a lot of room to kind of catch up there for Rogowski, but I could totally see an NHL team taking that swing way early in the draft class. So we'll look at a bit more of those storylines in the next segment. But before we do that, we do have a quick message here from our sponsors, Locked On NHL Prospects. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so very exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds in front of you. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips right after a turnover. And FanDuel lets you jump straight into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly, player props that update as guys heat up, and you can even take your swings on the next touchdown scorers, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every possibility, and every single drive. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all year long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. All right, let's keep this show rolling here as we're looking at the various centermen in this year's draft class. And now let's prop up the rankings here on YouTube for actually the 19 to 50 range in my rankings. So tiers 3, 4, and 5. And you do have more centers here. And this is what I was mentioning in terms of there being a lot of guys to kind of pick from if you want to reach on a center in this year's draft class. If you want a guy with a good blend of skill and two-way intensity, some details, but also some dynamism off the rush, I think Alexander Command is your guy out of Sweden, playing with Örebro in the J20 this year. He's young for the class, as a June 16th summer birthday, and he's just on the rise. He's just kept getting better and better and better over the course of the last 9 to 12 months, and he's a real riser for us at Elite Prospects and a player that we just love watching play. He's really gaining his footing as a dominant junior player in Sweden, and could easily also, I think, translate that style to the pro game. But if you want some more crash and bangers or net front beasts, you also have some bigger centers to take your pick from later on in my rankings. Guys, I have ranked 30th and 31st overall, but players with their fair share of tools that could certainly kind of justify selections inside the top 20 to 25. And that is Ryder Cali from the North Bay Battalion and Ilia Morozov from the University of Miami in Ohio. Cali is pure energy, a violent checker, 6'2", 210, September 6th birthday, very young for the draft class, but he's just relentless. The checking ability, the pace of play, the intensity he creates through his energy, and he's a player that I've also quite liked some of the puck skills that I've seen flashes of over the course of this season. I think there's definitely room to grow on the skills perspective, but is a true bottom six, like easy kind of projection if he's able to hit his upside, because just that mentality, the way he plays the game, it's so suited to the playoffs. At 31, we've got Ilia Morozov, perhaps a little bit less of a motor, but still good intensity and drives the middle of the ice really, really hard. He's like a man amongst boys, as up to now the youngest player in the NCAA this season, up until obviously the addition of Oscar Hemming, who just recently signed with Boston College. But Ilia Morozov brings a whole lot of things to the table. He's consistent and reliable defensively. He's a simple passer in transition who just keeps the puck moving, but doesn't really want to be the main carrier off the rush. And in the offensive zone is a strong off-puck mover to get himself open as a shooting threat. And that shot is above average as well, but it's at the net front that he does his best work. Just dominates bigger, older competition at the net front in college. it's been really impressive to watch here this season. And then we have three more guys in this tweener tier that I have, my fourth tier that you can see in the middle if you're watching on YouTube. And these are guys that I still have as A grade, so first round talents, but are basically outside the first round up until this point. And it's because they all have special abilities, but still some really significant question marks. And we're going to stick with natural centers here. I'll give an honorable mention then to Victor Plante, who may end up as a center at the next level, maybe as a winger. We're not quite sure just yet. He's undersized, but highly intelligent, incredibly hardworking, very high pace, both of play and of thought. He's a playmaking center who creates through his intelligence and his motor, and has just been the heartbeat of the NTDP so far this season. He's a guy that I could certainly see a team taking a swing on, but maybe not as their first center selected if they're really trying to bolster their center core, because again, there's a decent chance he ends up being a winger at the next level. Then we also have Maddox Dagenais, the high skill scoring sniper from the Quebec Remparts in the QMJHL, 6'4", 196 pounds. He's got a lot of skill to him. The tools are fantastic with Dagenais. I think overall consistency is the big issue here, but he's got the frame to be a power forward. He's shown the ability to play the nav front, and his ability to also be reliable at both ends of the ice as a two-way player who can back check and steal pucks, using his physicality to land big hits, the contact skills. These are all things I think that could really help him at the next level. There's definitely some questions I think here as well in terms of whether he's a center or a winger, in terms of the habits playing in the middle of the ice. But he's a guy that combines projectability and skill set and upside that have only come in through in flashes this season, but when they do, they're quite brilliant. And then at 36th on my rankings, we've got Adam Valentini of the University of Michigan, one of the hardest working players in this year's draft class, and a guy that is just so easy to respect out there on the ice. Yeah, he's 5'9", but he's 190 pounds, really solid, tough to move off the puck. And I think he's a player that could easily also go in the first round. He's been scoring at a really healthy clip this season with the University of Michigan. One of the best programs, or arguably the best program in college hockey this season. And Valentini has contributed 5 goals and 17 points in just 20 games, playing mostly middle 6 minutes. He's a facilitator, a line elevator, not an inherently dynamic player, I would say, but a guy that you can kind of plug and play wherever you need a dose of energy, and who can also really be of use as a bumper on a power play, as an energy guy on a PK. That versatility, I think, is going to get him picked high. At 37, I already mentioned him earlier, but Brooks Rogowski wraps up this second segment. Massive. And there are some flashes of skill with this player. I haven't seen them all that often this season, but he's got a heavy shot. I think the skating needs work, but that youth, that size, that position, that right shot as well. This ticks a lot of boxes for NHL teams, and he's just an incredibly interesting player. But yeah, the skating is something that could maybe end up being a really strong aspect of his toolkit someday if he adds some more power. There's room to grow there. I think as of now the overall output still needs some work, but yeah, overall a guy with a really heavy shot, pretty unique bottom 6 toolkit, whether that be at center or on the wing. Honestly, whoever drafts him, I don't think they're going to care very much, because I don't think him being a center is the most important part of his profile, but certainly is a bonus. But that wraps things up here for the second segment. In the final one, we're going to wrap things up looking at the 5 centers I have ranked between 40th and 50th overall. But before we do that, we do have a quick little message from our sponsors at Locked On NHL Prospects. All righty, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, looking at the centers towards the middle pack of the second round. And I think this is really kind of the range in the second round where you do see, in terms of pure value, a lot more centers kind of creeping into the boards here. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of these guys are going to get picked in the first round. Like, in terms of these rankings, I've already got, the top 5 guys we mentioned with Tynan Lawrence, Viggo Björck, Caleb Malhotra, Yegor Shilov, and Oliver Suvanto, I think, are all first-round talents easily. But among the guys that we've talked about now in the last segment, Alexander Command has to be a first rounder. I think Ryder Cali and Ilia Morozov will be first round guys as well when they're selected. Maddox Dagenais, I think because of that combination of size and intensity and two-way habits and in flashes of skill, he's probably also going to be going inside the first round. Brooks Rogowski, I definitely think will be a first-round pick with just the uniqueness of his profile. Adam Valentini, I'd love to see it. Maybe a little bit too small to crack the top 32, but he's certainly right in that conversation. But now we get into the range of guys that I think if they're selected in the first round, that it kind of qualifies as a bit of a reach. And there may certainly be one or two of these guys that do go that high on draft day. It with a domino effect of centers going earlier than expected, and you just have small reach after small reach after small reach, just digging into the center market in this draft class. So we'll kick things off with my 40th ranked player, and that's Jack Hextall. I think he's a natural center, very intelligent, really intuitive playmaker. In terms of pure skill and talent with a puck on a stick, he's a first-round talent for sure in this year's draft class. And in terms of maturity and details, especially when he's playing the middle of the ice, he's really impressive for this age group. But Youngstown's been moving him to the wing for the last couple months, and he needs to be playing center, I think, to really be at his highest value. But he's a player with certain really intriguing assets. I know a lot of people still have him in their first rounds. For me, he's a bit more of a tweener. I see other players that are either more projectable, more fleshed out, have a clear identity of what they're going to bring to the NHL. I think with Hextall, you still have to improve the physicality, the inside contact habits. But overall, he's a true playmaker who could maybe drive a middle six line someday. And if he does that down the middle, he could be a real steal in this draft. At 42, we have Tomáš Chrenko of HK Nitra in the Slovakian Extraliga, a player who sits at 5'11", 172 pounds, one of the older centers in the class, as a November 2nd, 07 birthday. But he's a player that plays with real intensity and has been able to find a consistent way to produce at the pro level here so far this season with HK Nitra. 27 games, 5 goals, 17 points. He has only gotten into 4 games at the U20 level this season, but in them he has 3 goals and 10 points. Clearly too good for that level of competition, and he's fitting in very nicely at the pro ranks. And he's a guy that really does have a lot of different aspects going for him, and he's been playing really impressively, I think, at the World Juniors here for Slovakia. I mean, Chrenko has 5 goals in just 3 games, with a hat trick against Germany and 2 goals and an assist against the United States, where in a game where he played almost 19 minutes as a top liner for Slovakia, again as a draft eligible. These are very impressive feats, and he's a player that could continue to climb up my ranking. I think these goal-scoring feats at the World Juniors will certainly bolster his draft stock. For the time being, he's still kind of more in the second-round conversation for me personally than the first, but he's certainly on his way up my board rather than down. But moving on, we have a pair of centers from the Sarnia Sting with big expectations coming into this season with Alessandro Di Iorio as well as Beckham Edwards. Edwards is more innately skilled than Di Iorio. He's a real sniper. The shot is a really big tool. He's a player with real flashes of dynamism, whereas Di Iorio is just well-rounded, reliable in all 3 zones. And I think that the kind of like this dichotomy in style between the 2 players is really interesting. But still, Edwards is a very supportive player, I would say. He gets into supportive positions. He keeps his feet moving. He's not one to take a shift off. I just think that the defensive awareness, the reads definitely still have some room to grow. But I think this pair of centers are going to have their fair share of looks from teams drafting late in the first round, because they both play in the OHL. They both have histories of scoring. And they have toolkits that you can build an offensive game around. But yeah, I think that it's maybe been a slightly slower season than hoped or expected for both of them, leading to a little bit of a drop in their rankings. But the last player, the bottom of the list, my 50th ranked of 50 players, Landon Hafele of the Green Bay Gamblers. An incredibly hardworking pivot. The work ethic, the motor, the checking skills, the intensity, just the desire, the will are irreproachable with Hafele. He flashes real playmaking skill in moments as well that can be quite special when it's at his best. But overall, I think Hafele is a projection on his energy, on his intensity, on his mentality, and can maybe be a third line support piece if he really hits. Perhaps more likely just a bottom six guy who can really check hard, bring some depth playmaking flashes. If he can harness those flashes, maybe you start talking middle six upside as well. But I think that combination of being able to play the middle of the ice, being intelligent and being incredibly hardworking should earn Hafele a top 64 draft pick. And I've just really enjoyed watching him this season. So he was the final guy I slotted into my top 50 rankings. But that wraps up the show here for today. Delving into the centers in this year's draft class, the top guys to keep an eye on that are natural centers in the top 50 of this year's draft. But I'd love to hear from you. What do you think is going to happen with this spread of centers where there's one guy at the top, then you have a couple guys that are in the top 15, and then you have a couple other guys that are in the first round, and then a glut that are kind of second round caliber, but have really good chances of being picked significantly higher? I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you want your team to do with this conundrum. I'm very curious to hear. But if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always greatly appreciated. And if you're a second listener, you can head on over to Locked On NHL, where they have a 24-hour broadcast of every single thing going on throughout the league right now. It truly is the best source for your information and updates around the league. But that is it here for us today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Sebastian Hyde. Thank you so much for tuning in as always, and I'll catch you listening again very, very soon.